17 trips to the Pine Ridge Reservation, the National Library of Congress in DC, the New York Public Library. I mean, it was a 2-year scorched earth search to get as much information as I could.
You're watching the Spotlight Network. Starring Hollywood's newsman, Logan Crawford.
They now believe a single member.
He works with TV and film legends. And now, Logan's shining the spotlight on the world's top emerging authors and creators.
International were abducted.
This is Spotlight with Logan Crawford. Streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV.
I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're exploring a powerful true story of Native resilience, cultural survival, and a family's fight to hold on to home and identity. The name of the book, The Dull Knives of Pine Ridge, a Lakota Odyssey. It is written by one of my favorite authors, one of my favorite guests. His name is Joe Starita, and he traces generations shaped by forced relocation, Wounded Knee, world wars, Vietnam, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty. This is American history through one family's legacy, triumphant, moving, and unforgettable. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us once again here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Books to Life Marketing for helping us put him on the spotlight today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Joe, welcome back. Great to see you today.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I really enjoy my time on your show. So thank
we
you.
Enjoy you here. The viewers love your stories about Native American history. You never disappoint, that's for sure. Let's talk about the Dull Knife family. What drew you to their story, and why did you feel it was urgent to tell it?
I wanted to, and I had had this idea percolating for a long time. The sweep of Native history in this country is so enormous that you can never really wrap your arms around it. So what I wanted to do, my idea that had been incubating for 3 or 4 years, was to find one family, spread it across a 4-generational timeline, examine each of those generations, what they had to do to survive. And I thought if I could get it right in the specific, I could get it right in the general. If I could get it right for this one family, it would stand as emblematic for thousands of Native American families spread across the United States. So it's a specific technique and a way of telling a story. If you can get it right for this one family, you can get it right for thousands of families. Exactly. And I just had to find the right family. And it took a long time to do that. But boy, when I finally did, on my 35th door knock, and Guy Dull Knife Jr. opened the door and he began to tell me his story. I said, okay, you don't need to knock on any more doors. This is it, baby. This is a gift from the literary gods, to have the 4 generations of this family at my disposal to put back together and to show a story that reveals to what extent a people will go to preserve their culture, their history, their way of life, their religion, their identity. And it's a sacrifice that most people could not begin to imagine. But this family not only imagined it, they did it. They lived through it from 1878 until well into 1996, 97. It's a century worth of sacrifices that most people could not imagine that this one family, the Dull Knives, endured. And I was struck by each generation had its own story to tell, but yet all the pieces fit together.
And the book begins with Chief Dull Knife's 600-mile flight to freedom. Talk to us about that, and what were some of the details that hit you hard while researching that journey?
Yeah, so we're talking about 4 generations of one family, and the first generation, as you just mentioned, begins with Chief Dull Knife, who was a Northern Cheyenne And like many tribes in that era, the military came in and swept the Northern Cheyenne, Chief Dull Knife and his people, off of their beautiful mountain homeland in Montana and forcibly marched them to Oklahoma, which was as dramatic a landscape change as you could imagine, from the beautiful mountain air and coolness to this flat, arid, humid hellhole that the Northern Cheyenne could not endure. So after a period of time, Dull Knife and another chief, Little Wolf, decided, no, we can't live this way. We would rather die on the open plains than live in Oklahoma. So they decided in 1877 to walk 600 miles from Oklahoma back to their beloved mountain homeland in Montana. They got as far as the northwest corner of Nebraska when Dull Knife and Little Wolf split up, and Little Wolf continued on towards Montana, but Dull Knife and his group of 150, they were captured in the Nebraska Sandhills and marched to Fort Robinson. And in January of 1878, they had been imprisoned since the fall. They were starving. The orders were to return them to Oklahoma. And when they heard that, in January, late January of 1878, 149 Northern Cheyenne who were in the barracks at Fort Robinson, they broke out in the dead of winter, sub-zero conditions, and they began walking, trying to walk from Fort Robinson to the Pine Ridge Reservation, where they would be protected by Red Cloud. So they thought. Dull Knife's family of 7 stayed together for much of the outbreak. His daughter was shot in the back, and they went over to her, and she begged them to keep going, to keep going. She died in the snow and the cold and the darkness of a cold January night in 1878. But Dull Knife and the 6 other members of the family, they kept going, one day at a time. 18 days it took them in sub-zero weather to walk from Fort Robinson to finally making it to the Pine Ridge Agency. The last 2 nights, they were so hungry that they ate their moccasins.
Wow.
They ate their moccasins. They had no food. And when they arrived at the Red Cloud Agency on the Pine Ridge Reservation, the people looked at them and they immediately just burst into tears. Wow. They didn't recognize Dull Knife. They were so emaciated and so near death from starvation and cold that they were unrecognizable. So the Lakota took them in and immediately began to feed them and clothe them and get them warm and take care of them. And ultimately, within the following year, Dull Knife was allowed, Chief Dull Knife was allowed to go back to his beloved Montana homeland. And he did, and that's where he died. But his son, the second generation, George Dull Knife, he stayed with the Lakota on the Pine Ridge Reservation with the Red Cloud Agency, and he grew up as a Lakota. And you get to him, and now you're talking about the Wounded Knee Massacre on December 29th, 1890. I don't want to go into a lot of detail because people can look that up on their own. It was a horrific event that occurred on the Pine Ridge Reservation on December 29th, 1890, as I said. And it was the 7th Cavalry that had been slaughtered by the Lakota at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. George Custer and his regiment were wiped out. And this were the remnants of the 7th Cavalry had surrounded a camp on Wounded Knee Creek, and they opened fire on the morning of December 29th, 1890. And according to the official U.S. Army report, they used these modern Gatling guns against an unarmed group of people. And according to the official U.S. Army report, they killed 290. 90 men and 200 women and children.
Awful.
Susan LaFleche, who we talked about earlier, her older sister, Bright Eyes, was in the church on the Pine Ridge Reservation the morning that the massacre occurred, and she received, and others, the wounded. There are some graphic stories about the 7-year-old boy who, it was sub-zero again. They brought him in and they tried to feed him with hot soup to warm him up, and all the soup poured out of a bullet hole in his neck. They found a 8-month-old baby girl, an 8-month-old baby girl who had been nursing at her mother's breast, and she had been shot through the back 7 times. So this was the scale and the scope and the horror of the Wounded Knee Massacre that George Dullknife survived. And later, after the massacre, after Wounded Knee, he was hired by Buffalo Bill Cody to play an Indian.
Wow.
Forgetting the fact that he was
Right.
an Indian.
Yep.
But Buffalo Bill Cody was wildly excited about taking a group of cowboys and Indians and actually a herd of buffalo across the Atlantic and to reenact these battle scenes between soldiers and Indians before audiences in England and in other places in Europe. So George Dullknife went along on that on one specific transatlantic Wild West mission, and like I said, they reinvented this massacre, or they reinvented the battles between the natives and the soldiers to these wildly approving and applauding crowds in London and Paris and elsewhere. So George Dullknife went from surviving Wounded Knee to being hired to play an Indian to reenact these kinds of battles. And he did, and then he came back, and on February 17th, 1899, Guy Dullknife Sr. is born on the Pine Ridge Reservation, George Dullknife's son. And the theme that runs through each of these 4 generations is survival. And when I had done all of the reporting, I spent 2 years just reporting this story, digging into, I went to 17 trips to the Pine Ridge Reservation, the National Library of Congress in DC, the New York Public Library. I mean, it was a 2-year scorched earth search to get as much information as I could. And when I find out about the birth of George Dullknife, Guy Dullknife Sr. on February 17th, 1899, then you see that the trend continues, that each generation, the issue is survival. It's always survival. How am I going to survive? How is Chief Dullknife going to survive a 600-mile march back to his homeland? How is George Dullknife going to survive the Wounded Knee Massacre? And now we have Guy Dullknife Sr., who at age 18 is wearing the uniform of the United States Army, and he finds himself in trench warfare in France, dodging mustard gas shells lobbed by Germans. He sees that men around him are having their arms blown off, that they're dying, and at age 18, he is fighting for his country, but it's a country that does not recognize him as a citizen. And he would not be considered good enough as a Native American to be a citizen for 7 more years. So he puts his life on the line as an 18-year-old in the trench warfare of World War I France, dodging mustard gas shells, and he survives. And 7 years later, they decide that 1924, that Native Americans will be granted citizenship. And the irony here is that Guy Dullknife Sr., who survived World War I, he desperately wanted to live in 3 centuries. He was born in 1899, and fast forward to 1995, he's in a nursing home. He just had his 100,000-mile checkup, and Everything was great.
Yeah.
But he'd also been a smoker most of his life. There was a smoking room at the nursing home he was in Martin, South Dakota. And he was there. And the nurse who was supposed to oversee the room, she went to do another errand. And he smoked unfiltered Pall Malls.
Hmm.
And he fell asleep covered in this wool blanket. And the Pall Mall dropped out of his mouth and went down and set the blanket on fire. And the blanket set him on fire. And he died. He burned to death.
Horrible.
So German bullets and German mustard gas shells could not kill Guy Dahlknife Sr., but a lit Pall Mall cigarette did.
Yeah.
And then we get to his son, Guy Dahlknife Jr. I would make, and I think I could make, a fairly intelligent argument that Guy Dahlknife Jr. in the summer of 1968 had the most dangerous job in the world. And he was walking point. He was the point man for his U.S. Army unit in the Vietnamese jungles at the height of the Vietnam War. And the company commander, of all the ones to choose, he picked Guy Dahlknife Jr. because he was an Indian. And he thought because he was an Indian that he could hear bushes rustle and twigs crack and see things and hear things better than anybody else because he was an Indian. So he would walk 30 or 40 feet in front of his army unit where there were all kinds of claymore mines and there were these horrific dugouts where the Viet Cong had just dug out 15 or 20 feet of earth and then put poison pointed bamboo, sharpened bamboo sticks on the bottom. So you would walk over this, plunge 15 feet, and these sharpened bamboo sticks would pierce your kidneys and poison you, and you would die 1,000 deaths. He survived. He survived. He survived, and he went on to become a fantastic artist who sculpted beautiful works that appear all over the northern Great Plains in museums and galleries.
Amazing, amazing. It's an amazing legacy, an amazing odyssey for the Dahlknives. We have about 2 minutes left. I think what's important about this book, among just reminding people of the amazing history of this family, which is emblematic of the history of so many indigenous families and Native Americans, is the fact that forced relocation was such a cruel practice and that it's often minimized by U.S. history.
Yes, absolutely. Do we have time? Do we have time for me to read the first page of the book?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because this is really important. The way you tell this story is really important. And
sure.
What I wanted to do was not amass a wall of mud, statistics, data, dates. By page 50, you would be in a coma.
Right.
You would be so bored. So there's another technique. I wanted to take all three verb tenses, past, present, and future, and weave them into almost like a triple chromosome effect and thread them into the narrative. And I can show you what I mean by reading this first page.
Absolutely. Would love to hear it.
The old man in the nursing home. She doesn't quite know what to make of the old man sitting beside her. Slowly and gently, he is speaking to her in the language of her people, but she is just learning English, and so his words have no meaning for her. Wash day, when chachala wash day. They are side by side, maybe a foot apart. Her tiny LA Gear sneakers barely creep over the edge of an olive army blanket spread across the nursing home bed. She keeps looking at the old man and then over at the family across the room. Her mouth wide open, her head shifting back and forth as if at a tennis match, her eyes searching for some sign that she is safe. She seems continually on the verge of rolling over on her stomach, sliding down the bed, and running to the others. But right now she is too afraid to move, so she sits stock still, staring at the old man's face. at the black eyes, the high flaring cheekbones, at the great hawk nose. Years ago, he stood 6'5" and weighed 300 pounds. Even now, she is dwarfed by his broad shoulders and thick chest. He is wearing a beige felt cowboy hat with an eagle feather stuck in the brim, his iron gray hair pulled neatly back in a ponytail, hanging in the middle of his back. Almost a century stands between his birth and hers. And so he doesn't really know too much about this little great granddaughter. He knows nothing of her fascination with deep dish pizza and Lego building blocks, or the music video she had just watched a few hours earlier. And she doesn't know much about the old man who is trying to make her smile with the funny sounding words. She doesn't know of his old friend and neighbor and the young lieutenant that friend saw coming through the dust and the smoke on the east side of the Little Bighorn that afternoon long ago. She knows nothing of his grandfather, the dignified chief and trusted statesman who had counseled peace, who cowered in the snow at the end, waiting for the soldiers, eating his moccasins to survive those last few nights. She has yet to hear the stories the old man's father told him about the ride to the hill above Wounded Knee Creek after the shooting stopped, the lean years when he was a young boy in charge of feeding 11 brothers and sisters while his father was in Europe with Buffalo Bill. Nor the stories of the mud and rain and mustard gas, of squatting in the trenches day after day, and how, when it was finally over, the old man, sitting now on the edge of this bed in a Colorado nursing home, couldn't vote in his own homeland because the government that had sent him to the Great War did not consider him an American citizen. Yes, there is a lot the little girl does not yet know about her family and her people.
Amazing, amazing. It reads like a novel, but it's even more powerful than a novel because it's nonfiction. It's the story of the Dull Knife family. And Joe's book is a wonderful look into Native American history through the lens of one family over multiple generations, over a century. The name of the book, The Dull Knives of Pine Ridge, a Lakota Odyssey. It reminds us that American history is not complete without the stories of indigenous families who fought to survive and kept their identity alive through every era. Joe, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Beautifully said. I love that wrap up. Very, very nicely done. And thank you for the honor of having me as your guest.
The honor is all mine, and that is great praise coming from a wordsmith such as yourself. I appreciate that, Joe. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time.